Well, I guess this is a sign that the U.S. Isn't, 100% certain that it wishes to attack Iran if they're giving them a chance to negotiate. Although a lot of people would like to see, regime change in Iran to get rid of the barbaric regime there. The fact that the United States is willing to negotiate with Tehran at this point, I think is fairly significant. But bear in mind, the two sides here are not on a level playing field. The United States has assembled a massive armada that is steaming towards Iranian waters, and that is going to put a great deal of pressure on the Iranian government during whatever negotiations take place. So this seems to be a last-ditch opportunity to pull back from the brink and for the United States engage in not to engage in military hostilities against Iran. So, there's a possibility that there could be a peaceful resolution of this, although I kind of suspect there will not be. I suspect that the United States will take some kind of action against Iran. But, we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future.
Yes, we will behind that. And Mr. Vadim, as we know that the sticking points, although they might be talking, but the sticking points do exist. One of them, of course, being the nuclear proliferation or nuclear ambitions of Iran that the world or many countries in the world oppose to. What do you think, how would that be settled, or what options do both countries have to settle that down?
Well, I think Iran could just abandon its nuclear program. Excuse me, that would make the United States feel a lot better about the situation. But I get the feeling Iran is not willing to get rid of its nuclear program, especially since it spent so many years working on it. And Iran really wants to have a nuclear weapon so they can use it against their enemies, potentially Israel. Remember Iran, they have political rallies all the time in Iran, where they denounce the United States as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan. So, I don't think a few rounds of negotiation is going to fundamentally change the character of the theocratic dictatorship in Tehran. But, if there's a chance for a peaceful resolution, then they should definitely explore it, even though I'm inclined to be really pessimistic about the potential outcome for such negotiations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vadim, for sharing that. Please
Sure.
stay with us as we stay on this news now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Iran of fueling war and violence across the Middle East and beyond. In a social media post, Zelensky has said the world is witnessing the scale of killings linked to Iran and criticized the regime for supporting conflict in multiple regions. He specifically pointed to the use of Iranian-made shaded drones in attacks on Ukrainian cities and villages, saying they have become a symbol of Tehran's role in the war against Ukraine. Zelensky has welcomed moves by European countries to take a tougher line on Iran. He noted that the European Union is moving towards designating Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, a step Ukraine has already taken. Now we welcome back Mr. Vadim. He is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vadim, for staying with us.
Sure.
How can we how can we connect these dots that now Zelensky is accusing Iran of probably through Russia, but Iranian missiles or drones being used to attack Ukraine?
Well, I don't know for sure that it's happening, but I'm not surprised by the accusation. Russia is allied with and friendly with a lot of pariah nations, including Iran. So it wouldn't be, it wouldn't surprise me that Iranian, weaponry is being used, in the war in Ukraine, if that's what you're asking me.
Yes, yes, indeed. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm also skeptical about if the reports show that,
Sure.
yeah, Ukraine is using those. Oh no, sorry, Russia is using those against
Right,
Ukraine.
but Russia and Iran, and Iran are like this.
Yeah,
They're very close and friendly to each other. So I don't see why they wouldn't cooperate in terms of war material.
yeah. And talking about the dictatorship going back, you mentioned that like a few negotiations will not be changing the trajectory of things how it's been for more than 3 decades in Iran. Is there any opposition leader who can maybe change Iran or put an end to this Ali Khomeini's regime?
An opposition leader in Iran? I'm not certain. You could bring back the Shah in waiting, Prince, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, but I think the Americans don't trust him. They think that he's kind of a playboy, that he's an unserious person who spends most of his time enjoying the luxuries that being a crown prince affords him. So there are. I don't know enough about the domestic situation there to tell you who would be an opposition leader to take over, but I know that they exist, and I know that they're not going to come to power easily because, as I was saying, after 50 years or 40 years, 40 or 50 years of calling America the Great Satan, the Iranian regime is not sudden. That's going to be pretty hard to back away from all of a sudden. Like, how do you make a deal with the Great Satan? Seriously, I just don't see how they're going to be able to do it unless they think that the extinction of their theocratic regime is staring them down the face. They're not going to make a deal. So I think this is largely for show, and I think that the United States is likely to take action, as I said a moment ago, is likely to take some kind of military action, perhaps in concert with Israel, at some point in the not too distant future.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. Thank you very much, Mr. Radam, for sharing that. Please stay with us. Now, moving on to U.S. Newly released Epstein documents show Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, was in contact with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein while he was serving time in prison. Sarah Ferguson is the ex-wife of Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and the mother of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. The latest emails published by the U.S. Department of Justice suggest Ferguson sought Epstein's advice on her business venture, Mother's Army. The documents reveal a close relationship between the two. One email from June 2009 shows Ferguson asking Epstein for help getting her business off the ground. Further email exchanges show Ferguson planning travel to meet Epstein. In July 2009, the emails detail arrangements for a lunch meeting at Epstein's Palm Beach home. The documents indicate at least 3 other meetings between Ferguson and Epstein in 2009. After his prison release, this continued contact has caused significant embarrassment for Ferguson and her family, with the latest revelations prompting her charity Sarah's Trust to announce that it would close for the foreseeable future. The files also include compromising images and emails involving her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, though no criminal wrongdoing by Ferguson has been indicated. Now for this, we welcome back Mr. Matthew Radam. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Radam, for staying with us.
Sure.
Now, looking at this latest links between UK's elite and Jeffrey Epstein. What are we to make of this? And also the fact that she has closed or shut down her, temporarily shut down her charity. So a charity organization, don't you think it's a wrong timing to shut down or temporarily shut down this charity organization, because charity organizations could have helped gain some good reputation instead?
I think that right now that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, is probably quite frightened of the backlash against her as more evidence keeps coming out of how close to Jeffrey Epstein she was. With the emails that were recently released, don't just say show closeness. There's one email where Sarah Ferguson is positively gushing over Jeffrey Epstein and saying, why don't we get married? I mean, it's really, very forward. Now, is she joking? She just a flirtatious person? I can't say for sure, and this is also the danger with text, right? Sent over the internet. Email's kind of a dangerous medium, and you don't know if people, you can't tell tone of voice or look at their body language to know if they're being facetious or joking or what have you. But it was a very forward email, and they're very close. And I think that she saw what happened to her ex-husband, the former Prince Andrew, after his extensive and damning ties to Jeffrey Epstein were revealed, and I think she's trying to shield herself from that by taking herself out of the public eye. And I wouldn't be surprised if she just disappears from public view, from the spotlight altogether for quite a while in order to ride out the storm and then maybe come back again at the future, because I think members of the public, actually people around the world, I think here in America, I think people like Sarah Ferguson and probably wouldn't like to see her go through hardship. But the connections to Jeffrey Epstein are a bit much, and it may make a lot of people rethink the way that they reconsider how they feel about her, since they're going to say she had such poor she was such a poor judge of character, like her ex-husband apparently, to become a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. So I think she's trying to just pull back until the storm passes, and maybe then she'll return fully to public view. We'll have to wait and see about that.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Adam for joining us from DC and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. President Donald Trump has hit out and comedian Trevor Noah over a joke that he made at the 2026 Grammys, which referenced Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. In a response to the joke, President Trump has called Noah's performance at the event terrible. He has also threatened to sue Noah over the comments. Let's listen into what President State has shared.
He said that I spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I didn't. I mean, he's a lightweight, this guy. He's a terrible, I think he's terrible. I thought he did a terrible job at the Grammys. I thought the whole Grammys was terrible. I watched part of it. It's not watchable. But he was a lousy host. I'd say not as bad as Jimmy Kimmel, but pretty close. And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein's. I have nothing to do with that.
Now we move on to U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has stated that her department was deploying body cameras to every officer in the field in Minneapolis, effective immediately, and the body camera program will be expanded nationwide as funding is available. Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced 2 more arrests following a protest in Minnesota church against the immigration crackdown, bringing the number of people arrested to 9 people. According to reports, a grand jury in Minnesota has indicated all 9 on federal civil rights charges of conspiracy and interfering with the First Amendment rights of worshippers during the January 18th protest at the city's church in St. Paul. Now we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do you think this is a good solution that they have come up with, especially putting body cameras on every officer?
This is proper, I think, because this time the low quality of the work of the ICE agent killed victims. So that's why the breaching protocol is a very important reason to create this big scandal. But without the video, people cannot identify what really happened. So that's why the reaction came from the Democrat side and Republican side as divided. But after video released, both Republican government or the Democrats lead the local government agree to deal with this issue, and the tension has calmed down. So video is decisive factor to de-escalate the situation. So that's why if every officer has the camera, there is a possibility that this evidence could be the reason of the de-escalation of the battle between Republicans and the Democrats related to these issues. So that's why this is a very proper way, I think.
And do you think this is enough to gain public trust again, as things have costed them a lot?
Yeah, in this case, the problem is low quality work. So low quality work should be improved by the more training, more education to the agents. So that's why in this case, just only the camera is not the perfect solution. More longer time is needed to educate and train, and how to deal with it is needed. And the other background reality, of course, in the gun societies, indeed the agent wearing the gun possessed opponents always. So that's why a little bit aggressive mood exists when they face something, the problem. So that environment-related issue of the incident is also the matter. And if the United States government, both in this case, federal government and local government, can improve the environment itself, of course it will contribute to the solution. And one more environment-related issue is Republican versus Democrats. Just before releasing the video, it was a little bit too much escalation has happened. So de-escalation is better to deal with this issue logically. So that's why this is also matter. So training is matter, and environmentally matters. And in case of the environment, battle between Democrat and Republican, or the more aggressive mood related with gun, all of these issues are related with these issues. So if the problem should be solved, all of these issues will be matter, I think.
And lastly, now with 9 people now indicted on federal civil rights charges following the church protest, how does U.S. Justice Department's response balance enforcement of the law with protections for the First Amendment rights?
In case of the legal process, of course, the investigation is needed one by one, because the background reality, all of the background reality hasn't published yet. Only part of the facts released by video, but at the same time, all of the background reality should be examined in the process of the judicial system. So not just now, it is not easy to say which one is right clearly, but during the judicial process, it will reveal in the long run, and that process is very important in the democratic country.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for joining us and sharing that insight from Japan. Thank you. Now, Now we move on to U.S. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani says 16 people have passed away outdoors as the city endures a prolonged period of sub-freezing temperatures. The mayor said New York is now in its 11th consecutive day below the freezing mark, a stretch that could become the longest in city's history. Preliminary findings show hypothermia played a role in 13 of the deaths, while 3 appeared to be overdoses. Final causes are still pending. Mamdani has said none of those who've passed away were living in homeless encampments and called each loss a tragedy. The city remains under a code blue emergency. With expanded shelter capacity, increased outreach, and mobile warning units operating across all 5 boroughs as freezing conditions continue. Let's listen in.
A severe cold front continues to bear down on our city. Today is our 11th consecutive day of below freezing weather, and we could very well be in the middle of the longest period of consecutive sub-32 degree weather in our city's entire history. Without temperatures rising above freezing, snow has hardened into blocks of ice. But the greatest danger posed by this sustained cold is to vulnerable New Yorkers who remain exposed to the elements. As of this morning, 16 of our fellow New Yorkers have passed away outside during this brutal stretch of cold. In 13 of these cases, preliminary findings indicate that hypothermia played a role, and 3 of these deaths appear to be overdose deaths. We await final results from the medical examiner's office and will inform New Yorkers as we learn more. Each of these lives lost is a tragedy. My heart was with the family of those mourning their loved ones. We are continuing to do everything in our power to get every New Yorker into a shelter where they will be warm. The cold is showing no signs of stopping, so neither will this city's efforts. From information available now, it appears that none of the individuals who have died outside were living in homeless encampments at the time of their death. New York remains in a code blue. If you see someone in need, please call 311. Outreach workers and first responders from the NYPD and FDNY will respond and get those New Yorkers the help that they need. Our outreach workers have only intensified their work to get homeless New Yorkers into shelter. We continue to operate warming sites and warming vehicles across the 5 boroughs. We have expanded shelter capacity, relaxed intake rules, and are working with our partners across the city to increase outreach. As of this morning, we have made more than 930 placements to shelters and safe havens. We have also involuntarily transported 18 New Yorkers who were determined to be a danger to themselves or to others. We have expanded our mobile warming units to a fleet of 20, which are moving throughout the city, equipped with clinical staff to treat New Yorkers' needs and get them off the street. If you are hearing me speak right now and you are not sure if you will be looked after, please let me make myself clear. Every single person will be cared for. No one will be turned away. As part of that commitment, we have added 50 new single-room shelter units for those who are uncomfortable with other forms of shelter, because we want every New Yorker to know that shelter is there if they need it. It is primarily due to the weather, whereas typically after snowfall of any kind, rising temperatures would assist in the melting of that snow. Instead, what we are all experiencing is a cold that is continuing at a record pace, frankly. And what that has meant is that the entirety of the city's response is up to the city workers themselves. And what they've been doing is an incredible job. However, it is a job that must continue. And it is also a job that has required us to go beyond the typical. What I mean by that is that we might typically have just sanitation workers doing a lot of this work. Right now, we have 2,500 sanitation workers working 12-hour shifts, each 12-hour shift rather, and then we now have up to 1,500 additional workers, many of them coming from separate city agencies who are supplementing that work, especially when it comes to bus walks, bus stops, and crosswalks. And at this time, we're seeing that that's going to continue. What I'm thankful to see is that the pace of cleanup is increasing.
Now we move on to Argentina. Wildfires rage across Argentina's Patagonia region, fueled by strong winds and soaring temperatures. Firefighters, volunteers, and local residents worked nearly 24 hours to control the blaze along Route 71, which was forced to close. So far, the fire have scorched more than 60,000 hectares. According to officials in Buenos Aires, demonstrators marched to the Ministry of Security and demanding stronger government action. In response, President Javier Milei's government has declared a fire emergency after requests from regional governors. The situation remains tense as authorities continue to battle the wildfires. Let's in fact listen into what some of the demonstrators have shared.
Cuando los fuegos no se pueden controlar, estamos en un nivel de catástrofe. Esperemos que el clima acompañe un poco. Los combatientes, las y los combatientes están dando todo con un bajo nivel de posibilidad de recambio en los sistemas nacionales, incluso en el sistema provincial de Chubut. Ten en cuenta que están todas las jurisdicciones del país mandando brigadistas y personal de apoyo para atender esa jurisdicción.
Y la verdad que uno tiembla cuando ve lo que pasa, más si conoces el sur, más si estuviste en el Parque Nacional Los Alerce, que la verdad que para mí fue lo más lindo que conocí en la Argentina. Así que terrible lo que pasa. Es todos los días una noticia, es descomponerse. La verdad que a mí yo no puedo creer lo que está pasando. Porque
hay que discutir una solución, porque acá hay un problema de que no se están asignando los recursos necesarios para todas las obras de infraestructura, el cuidado de los bosques, el cuidado de los parques nacionales. El sistema de parques nacionales en Argentina está abandonado y eso afecta mucho a nuestra Patagonia. Entonces tiene que haber también una solución de fondo y eso es lo que queremos discutir en las sesiones extraordinarias en la Cámara de Diputados y en el Congreso de la Nación.
Now we move on to South America. Uruguay and China have taken their strategic partnership to a new level. The two countries have signed 12 cooperation agreements covering science, technology, environmental projects, meat trade, and intellectual property. Uruguayan President Orsi has told China's Xi that both nations must deepen collaboration in science, connectivity, and sustainable development. He has highlighted the importance of intensifying trade and supporting each country's development plans. President Xi has said China and Uruguay will work together to promote a multipolar world and inclusive, globally beneficial economic growth. Officials have described the moment as the peak of the comprehensive strategic partnership. This marks a significant step in strengthening ties and expanding cooperation across multiple sectors. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. Iran denies receiving any ultimatum from President Trump on negotiations. Meanwhile, Tehran summons EU ambassadors after the bloc labels the Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group. Israel says the Rafah crossing will open today for limited medical transfers from Gaza. Only 150 people a day are allowed to exit, with 50 permitted to enter from Egypt. Russia says its offer to extend New START limits remains on the table with the United States. Moscow calls territory the hardest issue in Ukraine talks and rejects any NATO force presence there as three sides gear up for new talks in Abu Dhabi. Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte faces fresh impeachment complaints. Activists allege corruption and abuse of trust as she eyes the 2028 presidency. Right-wing candidate Laura Fernandez wins Costa Rica's presidential election in a landslide. She secures a first-round victory after pledging a hard crackdown on violence linked to drug trafficking. Former UK ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, resigns from the Labour Party. The move follows fresh reports about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Bad Bunny uses his Grammy acceptance speech to denounce US immigration raids. The Puerto Rican star tells the crowd migrants are human and American too. China executes 4 members of the Bai family mafia linked to scam centres in Myanmar. The move is part of a broad crackdown on transnational fraud networks. We start this hour with some breaking news coming in from East Asia, and China's former Justice Minister Tang Yujun has been sentenced to life in prison over taking bribes. Earlier in 2024, the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection of China had accused Tang of helping family members secure financial deals and accepting lavish gifts and expenses. He was accused of violating the Communist Party's code of conduct and was consequently expelled from the party. Tang allegedly sought to benefit others in personal appointments by accepting bribes, used his position to help family members secure business contracts, and intervened in market activities and judicial matters. We'll bring you all the news coming out of Beijing in terms of that story as soon as we get it. But now over to West Asia, and Iran has said that a framework for negotiations with the United States is expected to be finalized in the coming days, while firmly denying reports of any ultimatum from President Donald Trump. Speaking from Tehran, the Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said Iran has not received any ultimatum on talks. He added that regional countries are acting as mediators in the exchange of messages and that several points have already been addressed. According to Baqai, the details of each stage in the diplomatic process are now being examined and finalized. Meanwhile, President Trump has said he hopes to reach a deal with Tehran even as the United States continues to strengthen its military presence near the Islamic Republic. Joining us now to discuss the ongoing situation in the Middle East and its tensions with Washington is Peter Baum, the editor of the Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Thank you very much for joining us, Peter. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we've seen a war of words between the US president and Iranian officials, including, of course, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Is this the opening of real diplomacy here after weeks of the sparring matches, or simply managed de-escalation under threat?
It could be either, Thomas. The best outcome for the Trump administration would be regime change without firing a shot. Trump and the European Union, and indeed Russia and China, recognise that Iran is probably at its weakest ever, militarily and politically, for, let's be realistic, since 5 decades. Added with the domestic insurgency and what we've seen over the weekend with the explosions, Trump's has all the aces in his hand and the Iranians have very, very little. So if there is to be a diplomatic outcome via negotiations, then it will probably be so unpalatable for the Iranians because, as I've just said, Trump is in a dominant position, building up forces. Politically, Iran are isolated. Domestically, as we know, there's virtually a revolution going on. So it's difficult to see what the Iranians would be able to achieve from a diplomatic solution. Will Trump allow them to stay in power and give up their nuclear, providing they gave up their nuclear weapons and perhaps had new elections, something like that? One doesn't know. But I think that the Trump will demand such decisive political realizations for the Iranians, it would be very hard for them to swallow. I believe that it will lead to some kind of military operation, because I don't think the Iranian mullahs will give up to the demands that President Trump is going to request of them.
Okay, Peter, do stay with us as we move on to another development from the region. And thousands of sick and wounded Palestinians are waiting anxiously as Israel reopens Gaza's Rafah border with Egypt for limited crossings. The terminal, closed for nearly 2 years, will operate about 6 hours a day. Only 150 people will be allowed to leave Gaza daily, while around 50 are expected to enter. The reopening allows an October ceasefire deal, but movement remains tightly restricted, with Israel retaining full control over the border. Many families hope to reunite despite Gaza's devastation, while others face life or death waits for treatment abroad. Health officials say at least 20,000 patients are still waiting evacuation, and some have already died while waiting. Joining us now once again is Peter Baum to discuss the ongoing situation in the enclave. Peter, I've spoken about this before, but of course, so the first phase, which is now done, called for unrestricted flow of aid into the enclave, yet humanitarian aid is still very much restricted. Of course, a famine is no longer declared there. However, the humanitarian crisis is still rife throughout the population of Gaza, with malnourishment very much still prevalent. Israel now letting a very limited opening of the Rafah corridor, a key and crucial place for humanitarian aid entering the enclave, but only limited. This is supposed to be unrestricted. Why is Israel still limiting these crossings?
Yeah, this will be a step-by-step process. When the when the Rafah crossing, when it was decided that it was going to be open, there was never any intent from either the Egyptian side or the Israeli side that there will be a free flow of goods and people. It was always going to be a step-by-step process. It's a start, Thomas. Obviously, from the Palestinian point of view, they would want it to be expedited and to allow more and more people through. If after the first couple of days, let's say a week, the crossings go through unhindered and without any cause for concern from Israelis being attacked from the Hamas operatives, I suspect that if we're talking about the same situation this time next week, it will be a much clearer, more transparent and more open situation, with many more people and goods going to and from. But at the moment, it would all the political analysts that I've spoken to, and indeed from colleagues in the Israeli press and in the Egyptian press, it was always going to be a step-by-step process. It's a start, but clearly, and from where we were, Thomas, it's quite remarkable that this has happened at all. But I would imagine in the days ahead, we'll see a much wider, more comprehensive free flow of goods and people.
Israel have all the hostages back, including those of the deceased. Health officials in the enclave saying 20,000 patients are still waiting evacuation, and with only 150 people allowed to leave per day. This isn't fast enough, really, is it? We've heard that some people have died from waiting. Do you think Israel will speed up the process anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure they will. I would put a warning signal about the numbers of people that are needing treatment and the numbers of people are dying, etc. It's rather similar to when we were speaking a few months ago about the number of people dying from famine, etc. There are restaurants opening in Gaza all the time now. There's sufficient food for everybody. In terms of the people who are sick and need treatment via the border crossing, yes, clearly more needed and more need to go through. But I suspect this will be done in the days ahead, provided, Thomas, there are no incidents at the border crossing. If you remember, when the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation were giving food out and taking over from other NGOs, there were incidents leading to deaths. We hope that this won't be the case in Rafah, and we do know that the Egyptians are also taking a very strong view regarding security on their side of the border. So, as I say, if we're speaking about the same issue this time next week, I suspect it will be a much better situation for all concerned.
Okay, Peter Baum, thank you very much for joining us. As always, it is a great pleasure to speak to you. We now move on and over to Eastern Europe, and Russia's Dmitry Medvedev has warned that nuclear weapons remain a last resort option if the country's survival is at stake. In an interview, he said that Russia acts strictly according to its nuclear doctrine, which outlines conditions under which nuclear arms can be used. Medvedev emphasized that while nuclear weapons are extremely dangerous for all humanity, no one should doubt that Russia would consider them if the nation faced an existential threat. We turn now to South Asia, and the Balochistan Liberation Army has claimed responsibility for a massive coordinated offensive across Pakistan's Balochistan province, allegedly killing more than 200 security personnel over a period of nearly 40 hours. The group said the attacks, called Operation Heroth Phase 2, targeted multiple districts and marked the first large-scale use of female suicide bombers. Pakistani authorities confirmed heavy fighting and said security forces killed at least 145 militants. Officials also reported civilian casualties after attackers disguised as civilians entered public places and used human shields. The violence highlights a sharp escalation in the long-running insurgency in Balochistan. Professor Veselin Popovsky joins us now, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from Thailand. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us. This was a significant operation. 145 what Pakistan calling militants, terrorists, dead over the span of 40 hours. What does this signify about the stability of the Balochistan region? Of course, a hub of insurgency and instability for decades now.
Oh yes, definitely for decades. It's a very long conflict. I think there are 4 rounds of escalation, and since 2006, already 20 years ago, we have the 4th round of escalation. It's long, and there is not really much of a hope it will end soon, because of both sides giving absolutely no indication stopping doing that. On one side, the attacks on Pakistani forces by Balochistan Liberation Army, and on the other hand, the response to that by the official Pakistani army against what they call the terrorists of Balochistan. And yes, it's one of the longest conflicts in Pakistan, with no clear signals for any resolution. There is no dialogue whatsoever. It basically, both sides prefer to do the military options and not to negotiate any compromise. So we'll see probably more of this over the next years, I'm afraid.
As you've said, there seems to be not much effort to get this instability sorted. In Pakistan's largest province by area, it's also its poorest, with chronic underdevelopment despite major gas, coal, copper and gold reserves. And what does it say about the current way that this conflict is moving forward, that insurgency continues to operate in Balochistan, and that there seems to be no or not much interest from external actors to settle this dispute?
True, you're absolutely right, Thomas. There is not much interest internationally. In fact, I speak about this. There is no political interest in any other parts of the world in Balochistan. Left on its own, yes, the conflict has very little, as I mentioned, very little chances to have any progress very soon. You are right. It's one of the poorest parts of Pakistan, but with potentially possible reserves in resources and minerals. And for that matter, maybe that also explains the causes of conflict. Very often the causes of conflicts lie in some such opportunities to exploit mineral resources by insurgencies, and they would like to take control of those regions. Again, they can pretend some other reasons, some revenge, some frustrations from the past, some willingness to establish independent state. But obviously behind all of this are the resources, but also the violent methods that the Balochistan Liberation Army uses give even less sympathy. So in a way, nobody sympathizes with attempts to secessions. Moreover, when the violent means by killing people, and sometimes very many civilians also, doesn't really give a rise for sympathy, for international support, for international sympathy to independence of Balochistan. And we also know that the Pakistani state is absolutely cruel, and that they will also not consider any steps back, that they will continue to respond with strikes, with killing fighters. That's also the approach that Pakistan takes. So sadly to say, not much to expect here. It will be a prolonged, although not always we see that. So that's why we have several times, as I said, over the last decade, an escalation. But at the end of the day, yes, no prospect at the moment.
Professor Popovsky, finally, of course, the escalation comes with accusations of Pakistan claiming that India is financing certain proxy groups, and especially these Baloch insurgents inside Balochistan. A claim India denies, while Indian officials accuse Pakistan of using similar proxies against India. Where's the base in these accusations?
Again, that's not verified. These are accusations. There is no proof. There is no evidence. Unfortunately, it goes on for long. And as you mentioned, India also sometimes immediately raises those accusations every time there is a terrorist act in India. The first reaction is that Pakistan state, it could be Pakistan insurgent or terrorist, someone from Pakistan, but the question really is whether the state is involved. And for that matter, we don't know. We have no evidence to say that Indian state is involved in any sort, enough evidence to say that the Pakistani state, the state of Pakistan, is supporting some terrorist act in India. yes, the relationship between India and Pakistan, notoriously for many decades, is kind of a ground for such mutual accusations that, again, do not bring to any solution. And it's better to have some restraint, some self-disciplines in those announcements. But again, both sides have a lot of nationalism, a lot of populism, and that kind of builds up mutual hatred and often unverified accusations continue.
Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. Great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now move on and over to the Pacific, and Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte is facing a new round of impeachment complaints, accused of betraying public trust, corruption and other crimes. Rights groups and activists filed the complaints following a similar bid last year that was blocked by the Supreme Court. Duterte, who is the frontrunner for the 2028 presidential election, denied the allegations. Her lawyer said that they are prepared to address the complaints through constitutional processes. Meanwhile, the move comes as Duterte remains in a bitter political battle with a former ally, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who cannot run again but is expected to back a successor. The new effort faces stricter Supreme Court procedures in a Senate with more Duterte allies, making it a more challenging process. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The United States and India have agreed on a trade deal after a phone call between President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The US will lower tariffs on Indian imports to 18%, while India agrees to reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers on US goods to zero and stop buying Russian oil. President Donald Trump has warned that bad things could follow if Iran fails to reach a deal with the US as pressure mounts after Tehran's January protest crackdown. Former US President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify in a congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Days before a planned vote on holding them in contempt, the couple deny any wrongdoing and say they have already shared all they know. A U.S. federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from ending temporary protected status for more than 350,000 Haitians, holding potential deportations amid Haiti's escalating gang violence. Meanwhile, U.S. District Judge Anna Reins has said that claims that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem acted with hostility towards non-white immigrants. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has announced that all DHS field officers in Minneapolis will be issued body-worn cameras, a move backed by President Donald Trump as a step towards transparency, as the Justice Department also now conducts a civil rights investigation into Pretty's death. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said engagement with China makes us stronger following his visit, but stressed the UK is clear-eyed about security threats from Beijing and that protecting national security is non-negotiable. The European Union, headed by Anna Paes, head of the Middle East and North Africa Bilateral Instruments Unit for Syria and the Middle East, held talks with the Syrian director of the International Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, Kutaiba Kadish. They explored ways to expand cooperation. OpenAI has explored alternatives to NVIDIA's AI chips, citing speed limits in inference tasks like coding. While NVIDIA remains dominant in training chips, the move could test its AI leadership as talks between the two companies continue. Now, if we start this hour with US and Iran, Iran's leadership is increasingly worried that a potential US strike could trigger a new wave of mass protests and threaten the regime's hold on power. Sources say senior officials have warned Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that public anger following last month's deadly crackdown has reached to a point where fear is no longer a deterrent. The official said many Iranians are prepared to confront security forces again, and that even a limited U.S. attack could embolden demonstrators and cause irreparable damage to the political system. The warning comes as tensions with Washington rise and U.S. military assets arrive in the Middle East. Analysts say while the streets are quiet for now, deep grievances over repression, economic decline and corruption continue to fuel the risk of renewed unrest. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Nirmal Abraham. He is a political analyst, joins us live from Kochi, India. Thank you very much, Mr. Abraham, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, what's the situation like in Iran? If you can share any insights or reports.
Well, I think they're right about the fact that the protests could intensify if U.S. attacks. And the psychology behind that is pretty simple. If you look at some of the protests or similar regime changes that happened in the last 3 years, for example, we can take Asia. There were similar protests in Nepal. There were protests against the government in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. And in all these cases, one thing was common. There was an opposition. There was an internal opposition which was strong and united. But in the case of Iran, there is no opposition. There is no clear opposition. So what the people of Iran would want is an external opposition and an external pressure to be applied so they can also get out on the streets and attack and tell them that they're not backing down. So it is true that if the US attacks, they are likely to, people are likely to reinstigate protests, and that might affect or apply more pressure to the present regime.
Right. And how dangerous is it that if US attacks, this regime just supposedly falls? But since I don't know of any political strong opposition leader over there, except of some people in the Iranian diaspora around the world, so how dangerous would that vacuum be? Do you think that something like, even if this current leader is removed, is there any chance that this kind of regime would continue there?
Yeah, I guess the difference between, say, Trump quotes Venezuela very often about regime change, but the difference between Venezuela and Iran is that, number one, Venezuela, all they had to do was take out Maduro and things would change. The difference between Iran and Venezuela is that, number one, Iran is way larger. It's twice the size of Venezuela, thrice the population of Venezuela, and their structure is very complicated. There is a strong hierarchy as well. I mean, starting with the supreme leader, and they also have a security council, a guardian council, an assembly of experts who may have already decided the successor to the supreme leader, the IRGC, which is a very loyal militant group, and their own military. So it makes it difficult, also to add the proxies as well, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. Although they're weaker significantly, they may also chip in. So it's not going to be as easy as Venezuela. So if a protest erupts, it could be damaging, not just, if Iran decides to retaliate, which I don't think is the case, because what gives US the confidence is that the last two times they attacked Iran, in 2025 and 2020, what Iran did was a symbolic attack in US air bases in the Middle East. And that was also informed prior. So maybe that's what US is expecting. But if Iran decides not to back down and aggressively attack, it might not only destabilize the Middle East, it might also affect us in India. It might affect the whole world, because we know that the Strait of Hormuz passes through there, and Iran, if they want to, can block trade. And if they do block trade in the Strait of Hormuz, it means that 20% of the oil trade might also get disrupted, which eventually will reflect as inflation in India and the rest of the world. And also there will be delays in trade. So that could possibly affect the rest of the world as well. But at the moment, US is of the assumption that the last two times they attacked Iran, because they're significantly weaker, may not attack aggressively. That's the expectation. And we should also hope for the same, because otherwise we might also get affected.
Right. And as we know that US is the one who first walked off the nuclear treaty with Iran, right? Do you think that US was underestimating Iran back then? How do you analyze the capacity of Iran in terms of even counter attack towards US and also their capacity?
Compared to some of the other nations, I think Iran is prepared, because if you look at other nations, they're not, militantly prepared 24/7. Iran is militantly prepared. And so America is very much aware of that fact. As I said, they don't just have a military, they have the IRGC, which is pretty strong. They also have the proxies that can chip in. So it's not going to be that easy. So maybe in the past, I would say US must have underestimated, but now I'm pretty sure that they're exactly aware of the numbers of the ballistic missiles that are left, of the nuclear capacity that is left. And so, which is why they want the nuclear capacity, the nuclear program to end once and for all. But more than that, I think what the US is trying to do is force a regime change more than anything else, because if the regime changes, everything else comes into place. Because just like in Iraq and in Afghanistan, it might be the US, because there is no opposition in Iraq, it could be the US acting as a de facto government, maybe with puppet government in Iran. So that would solve all the issues. And the reason why they're trying so hard now in February 2026 is because, one, in October and November later this year, there are two elections that are significant to both Israel and the US. 2026 October, there's an election in Israel. in November. There's a midterm for the US. That could really swing either way, and that's why they would want it now, because there is a strong right-wing leader in Israel and a strong right-wing leader in the United States, both with the same goal. So they would want to do it now, and now that people haven't forgotten what happened 2-3 years back in Israel, what Hamas did, they can also set the context as see that they are supporting the proxies, funding the proxies. It is time to end this. So they can use that that appeal to the rest of the world to attack Iran. So this, I think, even for the people of Iran, that's what they're hoping for.
And if they do so, how dangerous would the escalation be? Yes, I understand that, as you rightfully highlight, that this could be a good time to gain momentum for Israel's current government and the current administration in US. But how will this affect the regional people or the neighboring countries around Iran, even India?
I think if there is a spillover, let's say there is a spillover, if that happens, it could affect the Arab nations, because as you know, the US has air bases in 19 different countries in the Middle East. So when they have so many different military capabilities, all of them come under the scanner of Iran. Even Israel comes under the scanner of Iran. So if Iran decides to retaliate without any qualms or worries at all, that could spill over and affect the other nations as well on a strategic and geopolitical front. On a war front is what I would say. But on an economic front, as I said before, it could disrupt trade, it could rise up oil prices. And as an Indian, what I'm hoping for is either the conflict to end or a negotiation to go forward and have a deal, because it could benefit India. Because at the moment, the Chabahar port that we are trying to build in collaboration with Iran is blocked out because of the sanctions. We can't do anything about it. And that's very important to us, because we can bypass Pakistan and offer trade to Central Asia as well as Europe. So that is being blocked. And even with sanctions, Iran used to give us discounted oil and extended credit periods. That's also gone now because of the sanctions. So if they get into a deal, or if there is a regime change, that could positively affect India. But if there isn't a regime change and Iran is fighting it, and if there is a spillover, it would not only affect the Middle East, it would also affect India and the rest of the world.
Yes, indeed. We will be eyeing that. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Nirmal Abraham for sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to UK. Following the latest release of Epstein files, UK Cabinet Minister Darren Jones has spoken in Parliament, urging anyone with relevant information to come forward. Jones has specifically addressed former UK Government Minister Peter Mandelson, condemning his actions. He has also said Mandelson's behavior was unacceptable and an insult to the women and girls affected by Epstein's crimes. Let's listen into some of his statements.
His victims must be our first priority. As the Prime Minister has said, anybody with relevant information must come forward and cooperate with investigations so that Jeffrey Epstein's victims can get the justice they have been denied for too long. Released by the US Department of Justice were documents which highlighted the close nature of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, including alleged financial transactions when Peter Mandelson was a Labour Member of Parliament and later Minister. For the avoidance of doubt, this information was not known by the government until the release of documents by the Department of Justice on Friday.
Now, the Scottish National Party and Reform UK have reported Peter Mandelson to the Metropolitan Police. This comes after disclosed emails suggest that Peter Mandelson has forwarded internal government information to Epstein when he served as business secretary in 2009. Documents in the newly released Epstein files also show that Mandelson provided advance notice to Epstein of a €500 billion European Union bailout that was reportedly aimed at saving the euro. Mandelson has since resigned from the Labour Party amid the controversy. Meanwhile, the Met has confirmed that it received several reports and that it will now review them to determine if they meet the threshold for criminal investigation. Moreover, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has ordered an urgent investigation into Mandelson's contact with Epstein. Starmer has also called for removal of Mandelson from the House of Lords. Now for this, we welcome Retired Lieutenant Colonel Himanshu Singh. She's a Defense and International Relations Analyst. Joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining us again. Now, looking at this, how politically damaging is this, once again, Epstein-linked controversy for current Labour government, given that former senior minister has now resigned and the Prime Minister has ordered an urgent investigation?
Good morning, Asuma. See, the Epstein scandal is one of the biggest scandals, and if the report runs into 3 million pages, you can understand the enormous information it would be having. So somewhere it shows the erosion of Western soft power. See, Western influences globally are not sustained merely by military or economic power, but by moral credibility. So when people who are in helm of affairs, they are caught into the web of such accusations, see, they are accountable. So somewhere the justice has been denied to people, because earlier also we had seen Me Too movement has taken place, but no one was brought to justice. So now, after the US Justice Department has released these documents, we see a lot of people are getting caught in this web, whether it's Prince Andrew or now Norway's royal princes also. So somewhere, we feel that when a crown princes or people like in UK, they are appearing in the Epstein's correspondence without any criminal charges also, we feel that somewhere it is not a propaganda. It is the Western scandals are doing the job itself by bringing out the true face of people. On one side, they want to tell the entire world. This is the hypocrisy. It is actually the US, UK, and all these places, they want to lecture the entire world about women's rights, about criticizing the authoritarian representation, claim moral leadership. So when things like this happen on international forums, I think it somewhere shows us that except the judiciary, there is no firewall which is there to protect common people, because all these girls who have been molested, some of them are not even adults, they are juveniles. So I think the fact is that such people have to be brought to justice, and I am very happy that UK is asking people to come forward and give any information they have. So I think they are now taking a very, very serious stand on this particular subject. Asuma.
Yes, but do you think the damage is already done? Do you think it's not too late? What do you think? Also, the fact that the Mendelssohn has forwarded internal government information to Epstein, right? So if this disclosed emails are accurate, how serious are these implications?
People like Epstein, they know with whom they are dealing, and that is why, to keep all the corners secure, he was sending the emails addressing to these people to his own email address. So he was very, very sharp. So when we talk about the damage is not arising because of the scrutiny. It is arising because of long standing elite opacity. Transparency strengthens institutions and silence destroys them. When people are actually coming out and speaking, we are getting to know the dirtier side of the royal and elites and the financiers and the businessmen and the politicians. So I think legitimacy of where, morality is a currency in a geopolitical world, such morality, when the veil is taken off from it, it shows that, the authority collapses, the moral authority collapses, and domestic influence collapses with it. See, these countries, wherever the Epstein files are reaching, the information is reaching, somewhere the moral fabric is becoming very, very weak. So I think it somewhere strengthen the narrative of that elites are beyond justice, and only normal citizens, they are abiding by the law and they are punished by the law. So unless some examples are set, I think the damage will never ever be undone, and independent courts should be formed to bring these people to justice.
Yes, 100%. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Shit Singh, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back. Now, moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that his administration might have some good news soon on its push to end the nearly 4-year war triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Let's listen into what Trump has shared.
We settled 8 wars, and I think we're doing very well with Ukraine and Russia. For the first time, I'm saying that. I think we're going to maybe have some good news. We're losing 25,000 people a month are being killed in that war, ridiculous war. 25,000. It was 31,000 last month. Think of it. Young, beautiful kids, the kids of parents, their parents. It doesn't affect us in one way, but in another way, it's 25,000 souls that if I can solve it, we're not spending money like Biden did. He gave $350 billion away. I make everyone pay. And the United Nations, they're a little bit involved, but if you take a look at what's happening, the countries of Europe are paying us for the weapons. So we have NATO paying, we send missiles over there, they pay us in full. It doesn't cost us 10 cents. And we make money, I guess, but I don't even want to talk about that, because what I really want to do is save those people from dying. They lose, Mary, can you imagine 25,000 to 30,000 people a month? That's like a stadium full of people every single month. And, I was blessed with something where I can get these things done. Got 8 of them done. I thought all 8 were going to be more difficult than this one. I thought my relationship with President Putin would give us a, much easier road. But there's tremendous hatred between Zelensky and Putin. Tremendous hatred. I mean, it's a shame, but it's taken longer than we thought. I did call up President Putin, and he's agreed. He's put it out to. They have the same cold wave that we do. Maybe different because it's pretty far away, but it's the equivalent. And Ukraine's a very cold country. It's much colder than us. It's colder than, they say, on average, it's Canada or colder. And on top of that, they have a tremendous cold wave. And I asked him if he wouldn't shoot for a period of 1 week, no missiles going into Kiev or any other towns, and he's agreed to do it.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Russia has largely observed a ceasefire on Ukraine's energy infrastructure as Kyiv prepared for the next round of trilateral talks on how to end the war. Zelensky has added that Russia has not carried out any targeted missile or drone strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure in the last 24 hours, although energy facilities in frontline areas have come under fire. Let's listen into what he has shared.
Сьогодні на селекторі були всі регіони, де ситуація зараз особливо складна. Фактично, це області центральної України. Також це прикордонні громади з Росією, де постійні обстріли, бойові дії. На Дніпровщині, особливо в Нікополі, були пошкодження ліній електропередач через обстріли. Також в Павлоградському районі і в інших громадах неподалік фронту продовжуються російські удари, в тому числі є пошкодження місцевої інфраструктури, місцевих об'єктів енергетики. На Дніпровщині та у Запоріжжі знову була під ударами Укрзалізниця, наша логістика, але зв'язок між областями, наше транспортне сполучення ми зберігаємо. Важливо, що сьогодні протягом дня не було ракетних ударів та шахедів проти інфраструктури. І це демонструє, що коли є у Америки мотив справді змінити ситуацію, ситуація може змінитись.
Now we welcome back retired Lieutenant Colonel Himanshu Singh. She's a Defense and International Relations Analyst. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel, for staying with us. Now, we have been hopeful many times and let down. This time, what's your analysis? Can we be hopeful?
Asuma, yes, this time we can be hopeful, but we have to see at what cost this peace is coming. See, 4-year-long war, people are displaced, there's a crisis, people don't have food, they don't have shelter, there's no energy in such a biting cold. And medical facilities are not there. So people are actually tired of this war. Zelensky was used as a tool by America and NATO countries to be put up against Russia. And Russian president, he only had one issue, that NATO should not come to its backyard. And Zelensky was very clear that he wanted to be a part of NATO. So when this entire thing is coming to an end, see, the place which has been chosen for the talks is Abu Dhabi. It is not Paris or Brussels. So somewhere the West has been already sidelined. Secondly, if Ukraine comes to the table, it is facing two brutal choices. One is, now so many people have been killed and Russia is going to claim some of its territory. So it is not a win-win. Secondly, there is no guarantee that in future a war like this will not erupt. So somewhere Zelensky is at a stage where he's actually losing it all. Moreover, Russia somehow has been managed to ask for what they want, and they will surely get it, because knowing President Putin, the way he has faced, as a child, he has seen the Second World War, and he is a battle-hardened and a war-hardened person. So somewhere he is going to have the way out. As far as US is concerned, see, everything is very, very transactional for US. They have already taken so much of part from Ukraine in terms of taking their rare earth minerals, gases, and other things. So the only person who has, going to gain something out of it is President Trump. Rest, I don't think anybody is going to be a winner in this entire conversation, even after the ceasefire comes through.
Right. And lastly, what about territorial dispute that they have, the Donbas region? What happens to that?
See, Russia is not going to leave Donbas, because the ceasefire, as far as I believe, is going to be where it is as it is. So Russian troops will not move back. They will occupy the territory, and Zelensky will have to give up if he wants to end this war, because there is no way out. Russia is very, very clear. They don't want any of this mishappening again in future. Moreover, President Putin is very, very clear. He believes in the integrated USSR. He does not believe in the current Russia as of now. We've seen earlier also, he's taken so many places. So his policy is very clear. If so many people from Russian side have also died, and it is a long stretch of fatigue which has been caused, they are not going to go back. I think the boundaries will be sealed on the current location of the armies. That is all, Asuma.
With that, I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Singh for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout. Now we move on to U.S. According to U.S. President Donald Trump, U.S. lawmakers are nearing a resolution to end a partial government shutdown that began last Saturday. After Congress failed to reach an agreement on government funding, President Trump has said that he has spoken with House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, both of whom have also indicated that a deal to end the gridlock is close. Let's listen into what he has shared.
Well, I spoke with Speaker Johnson, I spoke with Leader Thune, and I think they're pretty close to a resolution. We were at 5.6% GDP, and we lost 1.5 points because of the 42-day shutdown. Think of that. We would have been at 7.
Now, President Trump has clarified that he's not tearing down the Kennedy Center, despite his sudden announcement over the weekend to shut it for 2 years of major renovations starting in July. Trump has said the building is in poor condition, calling it dilapidated and actually sort of dangerous, and that he plans to reuse steel and marble in renovations. He has emphasized the closure is pragmatic, citing safety and efficiency for construction. Critics question whether Trump has the authority to unilaterally shut down the Arts Center, which was created by and funded by Congress. Since taking office, he replaced board members and installed himself as the chairman, the first for a sitting president. Now, renovations are projected to cost around $200 million, with Congress previously allocating $257 million for capital repairs. Despite concerns from some lawmakers and artists, Trump's allies say he's a master builder and knows best. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Israel says the Rafah crossing will open today for limited medical transfers from Gaza. Only 150 people a day are allowed to exit, with 50 permitted to enter from Egypt. President Donald Trump says he hopes to reach a deal with Iran. The comments follow a warning from Iran's supreme leader that a US attack would spark regional war. Russia says its offer to extend New START limits remains on the table with the United States. Moscow calls territory the hardest issue in Ukraine talks and rejects any NATO force presence there as the sides gear up for talks in Abu Dhabi. Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte faces fresh impeachment complaints. Activists allege corruption and abuse of trust as she eyes the 2028 presidency. Right-wing candidate Laura Fernandez wins Costa Rica's presidential election in a landslide. She secures a first-round victory after pledging a hard crackdown on violence linked to drug trafficking. Former UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, resigns from the Labour Party. The move follows fresh reports about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Bad Bunny uses his Grammy acceptance speech to denounce US immigration raids. The Puerto Rican star tells the crowd migrants are human and American too. China executes 4 members of the Bai family mafia linked to scam centers in Myanmar. The move is part of a broad crackdown on transnational fraud networks. Those are the headlines for the hour. But our top story. The latest release of Jeffrey Epstein investigation files includes holiday photos of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie sent by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, to Epstein in 2011 and 2012. These emails contradict Andrew's previous claims of severing ties with Epstein after the financier's 2008 conviction. The newly released documents, totaling over 3 million pages, also contain disturbing images, including one showing Andrew on the floor with a woman or girl. The timeline renews scrutiny on the royal family's continued association with Epstein, raising concerns about boundaries during the scandal. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche confirmed that while the files contain evidence of Epstein's links to powerful individuals, there will be no further prosecutions. Meanwhile, Epstein survivors are still seeking justice, with many feeling betrayed by the accidental release of their personal information in the documents. As public intrigue intensifies, key figures connected to Epstein, including former Presidents Bill Clinton and, of course, current President Donald Trump, remain embroiled in controversy. While Clinton denies any wrongdoing, new documents highlight the former president's ties to Epstein. with photos and communications revealing frequent interactions. Joining us now to discuss this is Shruti Dasgupta, an international affairs analyst, joining us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us. This saga continues, Shruti, and of course we have had the Justice Department say that this is now done and dusted, but they've also said that the Justice Department won't be prosecuting any new individuals, and so now the public is kind of hung in this limbo to decide for themselves what truly happened, with no new responsibility or allegations coming out or confirmed after the release of these files. How do you analyse the Justice Department's handling of them? And of course this story is one that hasn't been very far from the headlines at any point in time during Donald Trump's second term. Do you think this will quench the thirst that the American public has for the release of the Epstein files?
Well, this is a giant dump that they've given to the public of USA, and they've said they're done and dusted. So what they basically mean is there's going to be no more cases on anybody. The redacted parts are going to stay redacted. We do not know how much of it is still kept with them, or who is actually being protected, why there are going to be no more convictions. And specifically, his campaign ran that there are bigger, dirtier secrets stuck in the Epstein folders. What they've done is they've tried to normalize what he said later after becoming president, when Trump said that he's seen everything and that his government's people have been combed through those files and found there is no criminal wrongdoing. And that is exactly what this dump is saying, that we've dumped it. Watch it, enjoy it, get your curiosity out and dusted with. We are not going to be prosecuting anybody new, because what you're seeing is not criminal. It may be morally wrong, ethically questionable, but it is not criminal in any way or form. So this particular ghost that has been haunting Trump administration and was haunting Biden administration has been laid to rest, according to the Department of Justice. They've washed their hands of it and they've said, this is it, we can't help you anymore. Does this give closure to the victims? Of course not, because the victims claim that there was a lot more than just partying happening and weird pictures and paintings. There was a whole larger conversation that they wanted to have on this and pin people in power on the board and have them answerable. But that is not something that they got. What they got was a revelation of their names, identities. They got a large barrage of photographs, documents, emails. Some of those emails were just emails between two Epstein brothers or Epstein and some other contact, referencing somebody, but never a direct contact with the person that they were referencing. So they've kind of weaved a web which is so convoluted that it is difficult to pin the blame on anybody, and there is no justice inside.
And what about the people whose previous statements have been undermined by this? Of course, we've had the obvious one, Prince Andrew, who said he had no contact with Epstein past a certain year. These documents released disprove that. We have elusive emails from the likes of the Duke and also his wife, Sarah Ferguson. They've been in the files. We've, of course, had Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who said that he cut ties with Epstein. Before 2011, we've seen an email correspondence with them, even arranging to meet up. Now, we don't know if that meeting happened, of course, but of course, we've also had Donald Trump, who his comments have been undermined as well, contradicted, and conversations about Trump, not direct communication with him, but regarding him, even as late as his first term in office. Do you believe that these people are going to explain themselves? Are they going to be held to accountability for releasing these statements and then only being found out that they're undermined later, especially those that are currently in power in the Trump administration?
Well, let's start with Melania. There was an email where Melania was being very, very friendly with in an email with Epstein or somebody in his contact list, or even, I believe, referencing that she'll meet them somewhere else. So it doesn't just start anywhere else, it starts at home. So there are a lot of people who stayed in contact with Epstein because that is where the power was probably coming through. There's a larger conversation where people believe that he was used to money launder. He was used to help people, kind of exchange favors, grant power or access through his parties, and not just the dirty ones, just normal parties as well, was a way to meet and greet and get around in the world of powers, of movers and shakers. So there are a lot of people who continue to associate with him after 2008. And that lies the crux of the problem. That is why they have just dumped this. They have said, we are not prosecuting. We do not know what was redacted. We do not know who was protected. What we do know is that they're very happy to point the finger at Bill Clinton and never look at the three fingers pointing back towards their own administration. The people are going to justify it, said, oh, it was just a casual conversation. Oh, I didn't know what he was talking about. And this is just a conversation of somebody having a conversation about Trump, kind of a allegation. And they're going to try and tell you that, you're paid for, or if you ask the difficult questions, they are going to try and witch hunt anybody who's going to showcase that the people in power today are just as corrupt and in somebody else's pocket as they were when Epstein was alive and they were in his pocket. So this is the dirty game of politics and power, and they are going to try and find excuses and hope that the amount that they have dumped on public is going to erase public memory and increase their immunity to the sensational drama that was the Epstein files. And then they're going to just slightly walk back on their statements and have that kind of news buried and say it was all done and over with. There is nothing new to see. While the rest, the victims, the people who have voted for Trump on the basis that he's going to bring peace to the victims, justice to the victims, find themselves at a loss with no end to their quest for justice in sight.
Shruti, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. We have some breaking news coming in from West Asia, and Israel's military says it carried out an airstrike in southern Lebanon, targeting an operative from the Hezbollah group in the town of Ansariyah. The Israel Defense Forces say the strike was conducted a short while ago, and the military has not released further details about the target or the outcome of the strike. There has been no immediate response from Hezbollah or Lebanese authorities as of yet, and the incident comes amid continued tensions along the Israeli-Lebanon border. Of course, we'll continue to bring you updates as soon as we get them on that developing story. We now move on, and the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says that Moscow's proposal to the United States on extending the limits of the New START nuclear arms treaty remains on the table. However, he warned that if the treaty expires, it may not lead to an immediate catastrophe, but should alarm the global community. Meanwhile, Medvedev described the territorial question as the most complicated issue in any Ukraine peace talks. He also made it clear that Russia would not accept the deployment of NATO member forces in Ukraine, rejecting the idea of a European NATO contingent on Ukrainian soil. Shruti, some strong statements there from Medvedev. Let's start with the START treaty, which is, of course, yet to be signed by both the United States and Russia, set to expire very soon. If a new START expires, would the world enter effectively a post-arms control era here?
Well, that is a risk that we run, because on Feb 5th, when this expires, although it has been held in abeyance since 2023 under the Biden administration, we have not seen a blatant nuclear threat coming from either of these two nations. There is positioning, of course, specifically under Trump, where he positioned his nuclear sub somewhere in the Arctic and sent an indication to Russia saying that they are there and they are ready and armed. Beyond that, there has been no other nuclear arms race between US and Russia, despite the START treaty being held in abeyance since 2023. So the 2 years running now to 3 years, although the treaty has not been in effect, these two administrations have managed to not turn this into a giant geopolitical threat for the rest of the world. However, if it expires, does it mean that there's going to be a nuclear arm race? Maybe. We have the Iran factor happening. We have the world in a very, very turbulent phase. We have a very aggressive USA, specifically when he says that he sent an armada to look after Iran, and he has already done his actions in Venezuela. So there is an anxiety in the world. So any kind of a treaty which restricts two major powers of the world from being very, very anti each other or their vassals or their aligned states is going to create more tensions. There might be an arms race, there might be heightened tensions, but as they have stated that it is always signing a new start would also mean that the USA has to specify its position with related to Ukraine, because that was the reason why it was held in abeyance. And it also needs the territorial issues that have been part of the peace plans and have been pushed back and forth need to be addressed.
Shruti, of course, we're gearing up for another round of talks in Abu Dhabi, trilateral talks between the United States, Russia and Ukraine. Medvedev there calling territory the biggest sticking point when it comes to negotiations. Main issue being the Donbass, of course, which Russia controls 80% of, but wants 100% of course. Is he acknowledging that Russia expects permanent territorial gains if they want peace whatsoever here?
I believe it is very essential for the way they have positioned themselves. They want Donbass. They're liberating it, as they have said. They're calling it a Republic of Luhansk and Donetsk in that region, as in giving sovereignty to the people over there, aligned towards Russia. They have Crimea, which is part of Russia, as they have stated. Maybe it will change hands, or maybe be given a sovereignty or a different version of democracy over there after there is peace in Ukraine. So Ukraine should understand that they do not come from the place of power that they've been trying to project for the past 1 year. Their loans are signed, but the money doesn't trickle through. They've taken heavy casualties there. Until and unless they are able to draw USA in to kind of step in and run the show for them, they are unable to depend on even the European nations who have diminished armies themselves. They're having problems with conscriptions. They're having problems with military equipment. They need to tech up. They need to defense up. And no matter the number of talks they have, Ukraine continues to want everything back and have Russia pay for the war that has happened while Russia is winning the war. And that is something that is going to lead them to La-La Land, where they're not going to find a solution to the problem that is the war. If they actually want peace, unfortunately, as a losing nation, they're going to have to cut off a piece of themselves and give it to Russia, rather than have Russia take not just Donbass, maybe probably more. And if that happens through military might, Europe is going to face further tensions. They're always going to feel under threat. I hope this is solved on the peace table, because then it will lead to a new START treaty. Then it is going to be a reset of the world order. Then it is going to lead to new trade treaties. There are sanctions on nations for dealing with Russia, including my own India. So I find that this peace has to happen on the table, because if it is won through military might, it may not be to Ukraine's flavor as much as they want to be.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us on the NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you, as always. We turn now to East Asia, and China has executed 4 members of the Bai family mafia, a powerful crime dynasty linked to cyber scam centres in the southeastern nation of Myanmar. State media say they were among 21 relatives and associates convicted of fraud, murder and violent crimes by a court in Gyeongdong. The Bai family once dominated the border town of Luoqiang, running casinos, red light districts and large-scale online scam operations. Authorities say the group controlled dozens of compounds where torture and abuse were routine, and their crimes led to multiple deaths of Chinese citizens. The executions follow last week's killing of 11 members of another mafia clan, the Ming family, as Beijing intensifies its crackdown on scam networks across Southeast Asia. China says the move is meant to deter future scammers, as hundreds of thousands have been trafficked into online fraud operations targeting mostly Chinese victims. Of course, this is a huge development coming out of China. The Bai family operated out of this town of Luqiang, a lawless hub in northern Myanmar near the Chinese border that for years functioned as a safe haven for transnational crime syndicates. The group maintained close links with local militias and armed factions, allowing them to operate with near impunity until recent joint operations by China and Myanmar forced these crackdowns. Chinese courts in Gyeongdong have increasingly taken jurisdiction over cases involving crimes against Chinese abroad, even as when the act occurred outside China. Joining us now is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, an international relations expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Okay, just bear with us 5 minutes. Okay. These investigators say the Bai family ran sophisticated scam factories specializing in romance scams, fake cryptocurrency investment platforms, phishing and identity theft, business email compromise fraud. And these victims were primarily Chinese speakers, but also targeted people across East Asia, North America and Europe. They trafficked workers mainly lured by fake jobs ads, and they were held in guarded compounds, forced to work 12 to 18 hours a day and sold or transferred between gangs as property. Okay, we're going to move on to our next story. And the United States President Donald Trump has announced that the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts will temporarily close for renovations starting this July. The 2-year closure will coincide with the 250th Independence Day celebration. Trump said halting entertainment operations will speed up the construction and deliver higher quality results. Several leading performers have already cancelled shows following Trump's takeover, including producers of Hamilton and soprano Renee Fleming. The board, handpicked by Trump, must approve the closure. The Kennedy Center, a national cultural landmark, will undergo complete rebuilding aimed at making it the finest performing arts facility in the world, according to Donald Trump. As the UK Treasury is offering voluntary exit packages of up to $136,790 to officials as part of plans to cut hundreds of jobs. The Finance Minister, Rachel Reeves, aims to reduce staff by around 300 from the Treasury's 2,100-person workforce by 2030. The cuts are part of a broader effort to reduce administrative costs by 16% across the UK government. The Treasury could also make some redundancies if voluntary departures do not meet targets. A spokesperson explained that the Treasury, now the largest it has ever been, is aiming to return to more normal levels during this period of stability. Doctors Without Borders, also known as the MSF, says Israel's decision to end its operations in Gaza is a pretext to block humanitarian aid. The medical charity warned that the move forces organizations to choose between risking staff safety or halting critical care for people in desperate need.